This is Cheryl.
This is Emma.
This is Catherine.
And we're the Baronesses. This podcast is being recorded from various locations in and around Meanjin. We recognise the traditional owners of these lands and pay our respects to all elders past and present. Trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised as this podcast may contain sensitive topics relating to pregnancy loss, grief and trauma.
Welcome back, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks, Cheryl.
Good, thank you.
So we have Father's Day coming up, which can be a really hard time for many. Do you guys celebrate the day?
Sort of. It's a sort of
Yeah.
thing there. Yeah. Sometimes I'll buy a card for my husband and I will write the card so it looks like he's receiving it from our animals.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Sometimes I even post it.
Oh.
Oh, that's so funny. We don't really celebrate Father's Day in our house.
Yeah.
My father has passed. My husband's father is in another country, and we don't have kids in our house, so it's just another ordinary day for us.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, we don't really celebrate it. Neither of us are really in contact with our fathers. And yeah, for Brendan, it's a bit hard. Like I usually ask him beforehand if he wants me to do something for him, because there are some years where he's just like, I just don't want to think about it. So it can definitely be
Yeah.
a hard one in our house. It depends on the time of the year, if like he's in the good space or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I have asked my husband as well if he wants any kind of acknowledgement, from
Yeah.
our dog or whatever. And he says, "Oh, please don't." That's not his thing at all.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I mean, it's for them at the end of the day. So I guess I just usually ask and just to make sure
Yeah.
that that's what he wants or not. Today, in honor of Father's Day, we're actually interviewing author of Men and Miscarriage, Aaron Gouveia, of The Daddy Files, which we hope will be a bit of a balm for men and couples struggling right now. We also wanted to give everyone a heads up that Aaron and his partner are parents rather than being childless. We know that can be a sore spot for some of us in the childless community, so please protect your hearts and only listen if you feel up to it. With no further ado, here is the interview. Enjoy.
So welcome, Aaron, to the Baronesses podcast. So I'm just going to put a disclaimer out there for anyone who's listening. So Aaron, you and your wife, MJ, you've experienced the trauma that comes with infertility and pregnancy loss. But I'm just going to mention for the listeners that you do have children. So you've had 8 pregnancies and you now have 3 children, which is great to hear. Some of our listeners may not have been lucky enough to have that experience. So we just need to let them know that if that is a trigger for them, then to just perhaps switch off or listen at another time when they feel more comfortable to do so. But let's hear about your story, Aaron. So how does it feel like to be on the outside looking in, I guess, like when your partner is experiencing pregnancy loss?
Yeah, from a male perspective, it's tough and it's confusing and it's strange. I think for me, confusing is probably the best adjective, because as a man, you don't know what exactly your role is or where you stand when your partner loses a pregnancy. It's like, are you mourning the loss of a person, or is this, a collection of cells, or are you mourning the loss of potential? Is it okay to even mourn? As a man, do you have the right to even be upset? You feel like you're almost infringing on someone else's pain and sadness. And, when you combine that with just society telling you that as a man, you're a rock and you're supposed to be there and not have any emotion and be a post to lean on, you don't know what the heck to think. And the reason that you don't know what to think is because no one ever asks you. And, and that's why this book, Men and Miscarriage, I wrote it with my wife. I tried to be really careful about it, because in no way am I saying that this is harder on men? It's not. It's harder on women 1,000 times. But I think there is room in the conversation to include men because like we see, like I saw in the book when I interviewed people, so many relationships go south because
Yeah.
of this. This will
Yeah.
this you to your limit no matter who you are. And it's so important that everyone's included in that because when you're only talking to half the equation, you're never going to have 100% solution. So I'd say I was confused and hurt and with absolutely no idea how to process it and no real support network.
I actually think it's really great that you did decide to write the book on men and miscarriage because, as you said, we are sort of missing 50% of the population involved here. And I think it's really important work that you've actually done because I know for myself, I've watched my husband struggle and it
Mhm.
has been really hard for him at times. But it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to acknowledge men's loss and their experience.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, who wants to center men any more than they've been centered in the past? It's a tough time for that. And I completely understand that. I think the pendulum has swung a lot in that direction, and rightfully so. But, I think as always, we just have to be careful not to actively exclude anybody because the everyone has the best intentions in these conversations. But I think we're seeing now some unintended consequences of that is, some people are feeling a little left out, a little ignored, and a little confused, and maybe a little hurt and angry because of that. And so it's just, I think there's room in this conversation for everybody, and that's all this book was really about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
How did pregnancy loss and infertility impact your relationship with your wife? And did it impact other relationships in your life as well?
Yeah, it impacted it quite a bit. It was a very rough time. We had 2 miscarriages before we had any kids. I don't know. I think it's different for everyone. With the first one, it's kind of like you don't know what's happening. It's the first one. It's all just kind of new. And the second one, that one's like, oh man, this could be a real trend now. Like you start to get really scared. And we were lucky. For me, this was a little different. And the very first thing that it brought up was shame for me. My wife has a lot of health problems, and so when we weren't getting pregnant and pregnancies weren't sticking, I mean, not malevolently, but we both thought that it was something on her end because of existing health problems. And it turns out it wasn't. It was on my end. And I had a very bad reaction to that.
Mhm.
Just as I'm sure women have guilt when they find out that they can't have kids. I mean, when a doctor tells you that there's something wrong with your sperm, it feels like they're attacking the very essence of what's supposed to
Yeah.
make a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is, I don't care how secure you are in your manhood. That's hard to hear. And you
Mhm.
say it to really stupid things. I because this happened, I didn't find this out until after our first son was born. But when there's 5.5 year difference between our oldest and our middle, and we tried pretty much that entire time. And when we found out it was me that was the problem, my very first reaction was to turn to my wife and ask her if Will was even mine, if my oldest was even
Oh.
mine.
Oh.
First thing that came to mind.
Mm.
She did not strike me, although I wouldn't have blamed her if she did. Horrible question to ask, but I was so hurt and so embarrassed, and there was so much shame that I just blurted out the first thing that came into my head.
Mm.
I spent a long time not going to any kind of counseling, which is probably one of my biggest regrets. I thought that was weakness. I thought it was soft. I thought men were supposed to handle their own problems and be there for everyone else. I had no idea at the time that, the real strength is trying to be the best version of yourself and trying to make sure that you get the help you need to be a good husband, to be a good father. It was actually only in writing this book, because I would write a chapter and then my wife would write a response. That is how I found out that she tricked me into therapy. She and
Oh.
her she and her counselor ended up hatching this plan. They said, "Oh, can you come in as a helper, because MJ was seeing a therapist, and they said, "Oh, can you come in to kind of gauge how she's doing? We need your help. We need your feedback." And so I was like, "Well, okay, that's an acceptable way for me to go in there." And really, all that was just kind of a ploy to get me in and get me used to it. And after that, I was like, "Oh, I'm like, that's not actually so bad. You just kind of go in and talk, huh?" Because in my head,
Mhm.
I built it up
Mhm.
as some, huge thing where you're laying on a couch and spilling your deep and uh, but I don't recommend lying to your spouse usually, but I I needed the push a little bit, and even to this day now, I still have a counselor that I talk to, monthly, maybe once every 2 months or so is where we're at
Mhm.
now, but it's extremely helpful just to have that bit of time, and it's really not a weakness. It has made me better. It's helped me talk through things. It's helped me be a better, because I wasn't a great dad those first couple of years of my oldest life. I was sad and depressed, and I wasn't dealing with it, and I wasn't myself, and I wish I could have that time back. I
Mhm.
wish I'd been a little smarter about that. I wish I had had the network of support that I have now. This is 15, 16 years ago. But with guys, it's tough. I think women
Yeah.
have a natural network. They're just, I don't know if they're wired that way, but women just seem to have a built-in network and an ability to talk about these
Mhm.
things, whereas men just don't really do that. It's not as accepted. So that part makes it really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually noticed that with my husband is that he's very stoic, and at times where I may be triggered by someone else's pregnancy, he's like, just be happy for them. Like he's really
Mhm.
he doesn't get into to the stuff, but interestingly, it was last year or 2 years ago on Father's Day. That was the very first time that I'd ever seen it affect him. It was the very, very first time I'd ever seen him
Wow.
having a moment or feeling sad. So yeah, you're right. What you say. I was going to ask you actually. You touched before on the fact that it can take such a toll on relationships, and I know of relationships that have fallen to pieces because of this. So would you have any advice, like for either partner who might be thinking, who might be assessing, do I want to continue with this person? They're doing a full life assessment. Is this what I want? Could I have something different with someone different? Like, do you have any advice for people who might be at that place?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and I think it's so dependent on individual circumstances. But I mean, first and foremost, you absolutely, fundamentally, unequivocally have to communicate. When you let this all fester in silence, it just sits there and boils over, and it comes out in so many awful ways when you're not dealing with it. So, I mean, if you can go to couples counseling and then sort it out there, or at the very least, just start a conversation, because in talking to the people who were good enough to sit down with interviews with us, I mean, this led to addiction problems. There were drinking
Wow.
problems.
Yeah.
There were infidelity. There was
Mhm.
divorce. And most of the time, those people did not talk to one another. Like, how are you?
Mhm.
Fine. And
Yeah.
that's a death sentence to
Yeah.
relationships. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone thinks these relationships ends with fighting and fireworks, but they don't. They end with a whimper. They end with
Yeah.
indifference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really the saddest thing. I think my advice is try your damnedest to avoid indifference, because that's the real killer. When you just don't care either way, I would rather
Yeah.
my wife be screaming bloody murder at me, because at least I know that she has she cares
She
enough to
cares.
yell at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's still invested.
There's love
Yeah,
there still. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm. So tell us, Aaron, why do you think that men are reluctant to discuss pregnancy loss?
Yeah, it's exactly why you think it is. It's weakness and perceived weakness, and it's wussy, and you handle your own problems and pull yourself up by the bootstraps and all this stuff, and it's just so ridiculous. And I believe I bought into that for a very long time, and embarrassingly long time. I know no one likes the phrase toxic masculinity anymore. So use whatever term you want. It's masculinity isn't the problem. There are great parts of masculinity. It's the bad parts that are bad, It's mistaking strength for force, and it's good to be strong. It's not good to be forceful. Things like that. You just you have to try best to get by that. And it's not easy because no group of guys, and even now, hardly any group of guys, sit around and talk about their feelings. But I do find that the thing that worked for me was online groups. So I fell in with a great group of dad bloggers back in the day, and we still have our own Facebook group with about 1,000 people in it, and it turned into a sounding board, and I think it was a little bit more successful online because face to face is kind of awkward, and you don't always open up as much. But when you can write it all down and then get comments from people, that was a lifesaver. I can't tell you how many people said, hey, anyone else going through IVF, anyone else fighting with their wife right now because they can't get pregnant, and you get a lot of good information, but you just get a lot of good support. Some of those
Yeah.
guys, many of those guys I still talk to today. I've gotten to see a bunch of them in person.
Mhm.
They are real true life friends now, and I'm not sure what I would have done without all of that, number one, support, but also context and perspective, and feeling that, oh my God, I'm not alone. Other people are actually going through something similar, because it's a little bit different as a man. I think, even when my wife was pregnant, I would go to like baby center, and I would try and join the group boards, but it was all women, and no offense, but
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
wanted some
Yeah.
perspective that was a little bit more similar to mine. And that just wasn't, it's there for women, and that's great. I love that. It should be there.
Mm.
But I really, especially early on, 15, 16 years ago, really wish that there were more outlets like that, specifically for men, because I think there are a lot of guys who they might not say it, but they're researchers and they want to like dig in, and they might not want Dr. Spock. I don't think we're
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
the technical scientific things that are happening. They want to know from an average Joe how children are going to change their lives, and what to expect. And I got that with this online group, and then some. So if you can, search around those Facebook groups. That's the advice I'd give, because what a godsend.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
For women, there is a lot of guilt and shame associated with pregnancy loss and infertility. Do you feel that men also experience this?
If they admit it, yeah. There's
Yeah.
I can't say whether there's more or less. I only have half the perspective, but I mean, when a doctor tells you the morphology of your sperm is off, there's shame galore. There's
Mhm.
a feast of shame, and you're either going to dwell in it like I did for a while, or just choose to move on, try and get the help that you need. Science helped us. We were very lucky. Our second kid is an IVF baby, and it was tough sledding there, but we scraped through, and I'm forever appreciative of that. It's filled with shame,
Mm.
and I can say that it shouldn't be, but it's going to be. Like, people are going to feel that. I think it's a matter of getting guys used to the fact that, yeah, there'll be shame, but you can get through it. You can. I mean, this is not something that's your fault, and you just gotta learn to shake it off. And that's where a group of people who are in a similar situation to you comes in so handy, because
Yeah.
you really do feel like you're the only loser out there with defective
Mhm.
sperm.
Mm.
I finally told my wife, I'm like, she's like, what do you think? What's in your head? I'm like, in my head, it's like my sperm are the Three Stooges just like bumping into each other. Like, I feel like such a half of a man. And she couldn't believe that that's what I was thinking. But that's the stupid stuff that goes through your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to be said for being with other people in the same boat to help normalize your own experience. That's
Mm.
very like a balm for the soul.
Yeah.
Mm.
I was going to ask if For a man, so my husband's a bit in this position right now. He's of the age now where pretty much all of his friends now have the little kids.
Mm.
So he's left feeling though, well, do you know what? He's the odd one out. He doesn't he doesn't kind of lean into that very much. He doesn't let it get him down very much. But would you have any advice for someone in that situation? Because I know it affects people differently, and there would be men who do feel very sad and down about that. So, what do you do
Yeah,
when it's worked
that's
out
very,
for the others, but not for you?
yeah. I distinctly remember, I mean, with friends, I'm kind of in the same boat as your husband. I never, I was never really resentful of friends. And what worked for me at first was kind of playing into the, Uncle Aaron. And, I was involved with their kids and I love holding babies. And when they cry, I get to give them back. I mean, that's a ideal situation.
Yeah, yeah,
I kind of leaned into that and I guess you'd say I got my fix that way for a while. But I
yeah,
distinctly remember when we were really going through it, we had just gotten some terrible news and we knew that, this baby that we thought was this pregnancy we thought was going to stick was not going to stick at about 16 weeks. And we went out to eat and they sat us next to this like 8 month pregnant woman.
oh,
And we're, it's funny. My wife was totally fine. She was totally fine with it.
wow.
I sat down, took a look, and I was like, nope. And I got right back up and I walked out. I was so, that got me so unexpectedly. I remember I went
Yeah.
out and I threw up on the sidewalk. Like I was so upset.
Oh, yeah.
And and I hadn't ever really been like that before. Like I said, I wasn't jealous of friends. It
Mm.
hadn't hit me until right then. But right then, that poor woman did nothing wrong. And I hated her so much. I mean, I
I
hated her
know.
with my whole soul. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't expect that when you're not that kind of
No.
person. Then suddenly that
Yep.
feeling is right in your
Mm.
chest. You're like, oh my God, who am I right now?
Uh-huh. Yep.
And you kind of have to find a way to process that. Everyone's different. It could be therapy, it could be talking it out with other people, but it does. I would just tell people that that does pass. It
Yeah.
is fleeting. And for me anyway, just leaning into the joy of other people and friends close to me, that actually helped. And I know I've heard stories where that does not help other people, that makes it
Yeah.
worse for other people.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of, it depends on the circumstances and the personalities involved. You just have to, unfortunately, try and find what works for you because it's going to be different for every single person.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that beautiful story. It helps to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so relatable to women and men everywhere, I think. And it helps to hear it from a man as well, because I think there's just a lack of voices in this space. Really, really is.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the tough part because it's like so many times I almost didn't write this because I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, I feel like I'm invading a woman's space here. Like, who do I
Mm.
have the right to complain? I don't have to carry this baby. I don't have to
Mhm.
feel my body change. I don't have to do all that. But that's why it was so important to have my wife's perspective on this because the book is
Mhm.
really just it's talking about the same circumstances, but sometimes you wouldn't even know it because we came at it from such different
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's important for people to see.
So I guess, Aaron, how can women support their male partners on Father's Day if they are going through infertility or pregnancy loss or involuntary childlessness?
Yeah. Again, I don't think there's any universal answer. Some people might be, you kind of have to know your partner, right? So
Yeah.
some people really are better off when they just want to let it go by with as little fanfare as possible. And if that's the case, then I would do it. I would plan something, maybe go somewhere, just a two, get an Airbnb somewhere, and I like to head off to the mountains. I can't tell you how many times we went away on weekend trips where, honestly, where I would not see anybody. Because I after that run-in with the pregnant woman at it was the Cheesecake Factory. embarrassingly. Um, there are some times when I just wanted to go away to, a mountain resort and make sure I did not see any other human beings. But, other times, like I said, it very well might help somebody to visit, nieces, nephews, cousins, to be around family, whether you're an extrovert, introvert. Um, it really all depends. I wish I could give an answer that would help guys across the board, but I don't think there is one. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's important. That's why it's important to talk and really know your partner. And, you know, MJ, my wife did a lot at the time to make sure that like things didn't set me off sometimes. And she was really thoughtful about asking me how I was doing. And she even, to her credit, she even chastised the doctor sometimes. She's like, why don't you ask how my husband's doing too? And that
Yeah.
Yeah,
world,
very true.
like
Very true.
for her to do that, like say it to the doctor, made me feel like we were partners, like she had my back.
Mm.
And that's honestly the best gift. That made me feel like, because you sit there and wonder as a guy, like, do I even have a place? I should speak up. No, 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 I'm not going to speak up because I'm not like, this isn't my place
Mhm.
to do that. And she made me feel like, yes, this actually is my place. I am involved in this. I do have a place and it's okay to speak up. So that was the best present I ever could have gotten.
Yeah. So I think it's
Yeah.
it's very important for partners to advocate for each other, whether that's the man advocating for the woman or the woman advocating for the man. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So we've touched on, there's not a lot of men talking about this in social media. There's not a lot of that happening. How can we encourage and support men to open up about these issues?
I think the more people just open up and talk about it, the better. And I know, I think John Legend and Chrissy Teigen talked about it. And many women have been brave enough to talk about it. And it's nice to see some of the men, a few football players talked about infertility and loss. And I think that's great. I think you have to, with men especially, I think you have to try and reach them where they are.
Mm.
Um, they're not going to come to you. They're just not. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. They're not going to come seek it out. You're going to have to go to them where they live, where they hang out, where they reside, speak their language, and you might have to. It might be kind of a backdoor tactic sometimes, but I promise once you get a group of guys together and they realize that it's okay to talk about this, things do come pouring out,
Mm.
and that is immense. That is huge. Getting there is like 80% of the battle though, because there was a time when I wouldn't, therapy counseling, there was a four-letter word. And I mean, the thought of going into a room with 10 strangers and talking about all this awful stuff I was feeling inside, I'd rather pull off all my toenails. But even, not to dwell on it, but to go back to the Facebook group thing, that was something that I could frame it out. I could write it before I put it in there. It was on my terms. I could delete it if I wanted to. I felt like I had more control that way. And I think any online forum like that is going to be a huge help and a big way to reach people because it's far less awkward that way. And it feels like you maintain some autonomy and control that way. So I think the more high profile people speak about it, the more common it becomes. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and
Yeah.
this is one of those topics that's not pleasant. I knew that
Yeah.
this book wasn't going to be a bestseller because it's a bummer, and it's hard and it's uncomfortable and it's messy, and it involves so many things. Like when you get pregnant, you some people like we did we told everybody,
Yeah.
6 weeks in we made the announcements, the social media, and when you have a bigger social media platform than most, that gets out there, and then you have to take it back, and it is the absolute most
Mm.
just terrible feeling. You feel like
Yeah.
such a fraud. You feel like you've perpetrated a fraud on these poor people. You feel like you've let relatives down. And then, the comments come in from people. There's a whole chapter of the book devoted to the different well-intentioned but absolutely horrific
Yeah.
comments
Yeah.
that people make that they feel
Yeah.
entitled to make. And so I would say to all those people, just you don't have to, not only do you not have to fix anything, it's not your place to fix anything.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
be there. Like you can't fix it. Only time can fix that. And you just have to be there with an open heart and an open mind, and sometimes just be a sponge and listen
Yeah.
and not editorialize. So
Mm.
if I just want to
Yeah.
throw in that bit of advice, because sometimes the most hurtful things come from people close to us who we
Oh,
love,
yeah.
but they
Mm.
say
Mhm.
just terribly thoughtless things.
Yeah.
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 It's true. So would you have any thoughts on male infertility and how to better handle that as a society? I guess it comes down to the talking about it.
It's a really tough one because it hits so close to home, and it kind of cuts to the essence of, people. If you want to boil it down biologically, a lot of guys think, okay, my job on earth is to populate the species, and now you're telling me that, like, this one biological imperative that I have, I can't meet because my sperm is faulty. I don't know exactly how we get out of that mindset, but I know that talking about it helps, and normalizing it helps.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be a slow process. I mean, moving that needle is going to be very slow and very deliberate and very painful. But I mean, with very few circumstances, it's something you didn't do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless maybe addiction or something like that. But still, it's it's not something that you're purposefully trying to do.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to start with that. You need to start with the fact that sometimes you just have rotten, rotten luck. I mean, half of these, even absent infertility, half of these miscarriages, doctors don't have a cause for anything. Sometimes they just sit there and say, crap luck, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
almost the
Yeah.
hardest to hear. Because at least if there was a problem, you could pinpoint it and maybe try and fix it or know what it is. But that uncertainty is so terrible. Like the fact that you start thinking like, oh wow, I'm just fortune's whipping boy. Like, that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
horrible thing.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about that. You can't fix that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once you realize there are some things you can't fix, um, you know, you kind of have to talk through them and find your own way. And that's with male infertility specifically. That's just sometimes it's just luck of the draw, or
Yeah.
unlucky draw, and you just
Yeah.
have to find a way through it. It could be a hobby. It could be, I took up. That's, I think, a lot of what saved me. I took up writing about this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I did not. The last thing I wanted to do was tell anyone about this, but
Mm.
then I wrote it all down, and I had a blog at the time, and like it took me a long time to hit publish, but when I did, all these emails from men, women, all over the world started coming in, and they'd be like, "Thank you so much. That really helped." And
Mm.
so
Mm.
I still hated it. I still thought I was still upset by it. I still felt victimized by it, but at the same time, if sharing a little bit of my pain could help somebody, then that gave it some purpose. And that's personally what
Yeah.
I needed to
Yeah.
get through it. I needed it to have some silver lining. I needed it to have some purpose. All these struggles couldn't
Yeah.
be for nothing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thankfully, I mean, we're very lucky. I mean, we had, 5 miscarriages and losses, but 3 kids, and we are extraordinarily lucky for that. And we know that because I've talked to many people who weren't that lucky.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's so, so hard. But,
Yeah.
sometimes for some people, writing it down, sharing it, hearing from others that it helps, that makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And I think that it's so nice that you're actually talking about it, because my partner has also got male factor infertility, and the fact that there wasn't many people talking about it, and you just feel like there's no support, and to hear
Mm.
another man talk about it, it really does help. I can see it, like when he sees someone talking about it, it like lifts him up. Yeah. It
Absolutely.
touches
And
me.
it's not like it's it's not like a fun club you ever asked to be
No,
in.
no.
It sure does help to know that you're not going through it alone.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Mm.
and to all the men, and to women and men who talk about this, like, thank you, because
Mm,
that is not easy, and it doesn't come absent risk, and it doesn't
mm.
come absent harm sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
those people are really brave. The people who talk to us for the book are incredibly brave, and I'm so grateful to them for trusting us with their stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, Aaron, did you have a plan B? Like, if you didn't end up having children, how do you think your life would look now?
Oof, it's fun. We were just we were just talking about this. I be this is, I hope my kids don't see it. Even if they do see it, I would have been I'm not, I guess I'm not like a lot of parents. I see a lot of tension between the kind of childless by choice or child-free community and
Mm.
parents. And I personally don't understand it, because I completely understand why people would choose not to have kids these days.
Yeah.
Like, I
Mm.
I get it. It makes all the sense in the world to me. And I don't see any problem with that. I mean, my life would be, I mean, it's hard to say, whether it's empty or
Yeah.
fuller, but I don't believe for a second that a child-free by choice lifestyle is in any way any less full or robust than people with kids. I mean, you can fill that with anything you want. When I think of all the traveling that I could do, all the disposable income I have, I mean, a lot of parents don't want to say they think about that. It's bull. They do. I
Mm.
think about it. Everyone thinks about it. That doesn't mean that I don't want my kids. I love my
Yeah.
kids. I can't imagine my life without them. But would my life be easier without them? I mean, we have a we have a neurodivergent 11-year-old, and it, that's a lot. That is a
Mm.
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
work, and it's work we signed up for, and it's work that we will do.
Yeah.
But I wholeheartedly understand why someone wouldn't want to, roll the dice with kids, or especially kids who have additional challenges when you're raising them. So, I mean, I don't ever vilify those people. I don't understand anyone who vilifies those people or looks down upon them or thinks that they're somehow their life is less than. It just doesn't compute to me.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you consider yourself an advocate in any way? And if so, for which community in particular?
Man, advocacy is a tricky question these days, huh? I'd like to think so. I mean, I have I have a lot of kind of issues that I like to focus on. I think I've tried to be a very loud advocate for the LGBTQ plus community over the years. My aunts were gay. I kind of I grew up I'm in Massachusetts in the United States, very kind of blue liberal bubble. So I've I've never understood like the lack of marriage equality. Thank goodness we have it now. I've always been an active, very loud voice in that space. I try to be an active voice for dads and for fatherhood in general. It was a lot more I was a lot more active in it when my kids were younger. I think the kids get older, and it's just like bigger kids, bigger problems. It kind of takes a lot out of you. So now, I don't have the website anymore. I kept some of my social channels, and I'm just trying to, I think maybe the biggest one is just trying to downplay all this toxic masculinity and let boys, especially because I have three boys. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
kind of wish I had had a daughter. Was kind of hoping for that dual perspective, but I can't speak to, to girl issues too much because I don't have the experience in raising them. But with boys, I think, my first book was Raising Boys to Be Good Men, and it was all about identifying these toxic traits and trying to move beyond them. So that's over the past few years, that's been where most of my efforts lay, because I have, that 11-year-old, He's a boy who sews. He's a
Sam.
Sam, yeah. Sam went crazy viral on TikTok for sewing, which was the most random thing in the world.
I
And
love his videos.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. But honestly, all that was, I tape all of my kids getting presents on their birthday. And for his birthday a few years ago, we got him a sewing machine. And so I just put it online because it was nice. And I mean, to have that go as crazy as it did and lead to the Rachel Ray show and the Today Show and CBS,
Wow.
That's
it
so
was
cool.
the
Yeah.
most bizarre thing in the world. And he actually went viral in 2018 because my mom did nails for a living back in the day, and I didn't give her any granddaughters, but she wasn't going to let the fact that she had three grandsons stop her from painting their nails. And so she did. He went to kindergarten and he got made fun of. And he came home and he was devastated. He had no he had no knowledge up to then that that was in any way looked down
Yeah.
upon. And I got really angry. I probably shouldn't have even posted it, but I wrote this whole Twitter thread back when I was still on Twitter, and I published it right before I went to bed. And when I woke up, my phone was going absolutely bonkers. I thought it was broken. And before the sun even rose, I think Time Magazine was calling. And then, so I mean, he's gone viral for his nails being painted, for his sewing. He made me a shirt that got 20 something million hits on TikTok alone. Such
Wow.
a random thing the internet is. But again, you talk about shame, that came with a lot of problems. A legitimate Nazi website picked that up
Wow.
Oh.
and featured, me and my then 5-year-old son right on the front cover, like tearing apart our appearance. Everything you'd expect from a Nazi website was in that article. And it's
Wow.
scary, when they call your house, when they find your parents' number and they call their house and they call your employer. I mean, it's nuts. And all because what? A kid likes painted fingernails?
Yeah. It's so
It's
arbitrary.
yeah, it's a
Wow.
color. It's a color. Kids like
Yeah.
colors. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean people are like, well, is he gay? I'm like, well, he's 5 years old. I don't really know, and I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter. And he's
That's
11 now.
crazy.
It
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Painting your fingernails is not going to make you gay. It's
No.
it's a silly,
Wow.
silly
No.
hobby.
Do you know
And
what
so,
that reminds? Oh, sorry, you go.
oh no, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like recently watched the Australian Shark Tank, and one of the competitors on there, they had created a product called Glossy Boys, like a
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
yeah, nail polish pens. I thought that was so awesome.
Yeah.
Guess what? Guess what? He
What?
sent a package to Sam a few weeks ago.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
That's
that's
awesome.
great.
That's awesome.
He hasn't tried it out yet, but he sent him some swag and a nice letter. What a great kid he is. He is
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
yeah,
That video's in the queue. We're gonna be putting it
cool.
up soon. But Glossy Boys, yeah, they did send Sam something, and he was
Yeah.
so excited to get it. So it's
Oh,
Oh,
that's
funny.
I
great.
love that.
That's so
Yeah, I
good.
love it. While I
Yeah.
watched that episode, I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, no, I see a lot of younger men and boys at the moment painting their nails a lot. Like it seems to be more accepted. So I think that's
Yeah,
great. I think it's awesome. I mean, boys should be able to express themselves however they want without
yeah.
judgment. Yeah.
And that's when you asked about advocacy, that's really it. I think it's criminal that we don't allow boys to kind of access their entire emotional bandwidth. We put them in this box. And right now, I don't want to, we say girls are having a moment. Like girls can do anything. Girls should do STEM, and they should. I love it. I want more of it. It's
Yeah.
great. But at the same time, I think we are not talking about boys as we're kind of letting them go by the wayside a little
Yep.
bit. And I think that's gonna be a problem. Like it's great that I think there's, at least in the United States, there's more women graduating from college. 40% of homes have female breadwinners in them, and I love that. That is progress, and that should continue. But we also can't forget that like boys get shoved into these little boxes too, and it's harmful in there. And we should
Yeah.
not confine them, and we should let's open it up to everybody right now,
Yeah,
because that
absolutely. Yeah.
not just a boy issue. When boys are constricted like that, it's going to end up hurting women as well. I truly believe that's how you get the incel
Yeah.
culture, and I
Mm.
think that's detrimental for women too. So, helping boys out benefits everybody. I really believe that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. But I'm
Mhm.
glad, I'm really glad, Aaron, that you are out there breaking down the barriers, not just for infertility, but also the toxic masculinity barriers, which is just
Uh,
really great to see. So
Thanks.
we look forward to seeing what you do next.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
me too. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, like, I'm just so grateful that you are in this space. Like, honestly, we need more people like you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and speaking about it.
No, are you kidding me? Thanks for having me. It was so great to get your invitation, because this is right up my alley. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's
How
great.
can our listeners find you and your books?
Everything, the two books I have, you can go to, Barnes and Noble or Amazon. They're available there. And for the social media, I'm Daddy Files on pretty much all social media. I quit Twitter, didn't like where that was headed.
Yeah.
So I'm not on there. But Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Daddy Files on all of them. And it's kind of a little smorgasbord of everything. I call it parenting at the intersection of writing at the intersection of parenting and politics. So
Yeah.
there's a
mm.
lot going on. It's a little sports, a little photography, a little politics, and a whole bunch of parenting. So come along for the ride.
That was such a great interview with Aaron. Really enjoyed speaking with him. We'll be back in your ears in a fortnight when Emma will be talking about pets as family. In the meantime, make sure you leave a review on your preferred podcast streaming channel and stay kind. That means self kindness too.